Welcome to our afternoon session, and we're starting off with the Fuse Talks. We have 7 fantastic students who are here to share with you work, scholarship, and research that they've done. And so we're going to start with Zachary Stockton. Zachary Stockton's presentation is inspired by the Film History and Society certificate. After relocating from Chicago to Springfield, he intertwined his passions for film and advocacy as an English major. Stockton's dedication to public service stems from his childhood in an under-resourced community, a challenge he believes can be changed through storytelling. On campus, he is an active member of Black United Independent Collegiate. He was selected to attend the 2025 Big 12 Conference on Black Student Government. There, Stockton received the Nelson Mandela Award for his commitment to racial equity. Elevated by Jury's creative writing coursework, he wrote an award-winning horror fiction about public housing and urban poverty. Off-campus, Stockton is a writer for the Springfield Tenants United and coordinated for their local food security initiative. He is a U.S. Department of State Critical Language Scholarship recipient, and last week, he was named Jury's first Truman Scholar. Please join me in welcoming Zachary.
Good afternoon, everybody. We'll be starting off today with some noise. What about now? Okay, I'll try my best. Maybe I'll step back here. How about now? Okay, there we go. You gotta start a horror presentation off with something like that, so. Good afternoon, everybody. We'll be starting off today with a rather light topic, poverty in horror cinema. So I'd like to double the ante with a pretty existential question today. What are you scared of? And how is the media framing that nightmare? Perhaps you are scared of clowns, or maybe, even though you grew up in rural Missouri, you're scared of sharks. Now, that probably didn't arise from a personal experience with a beast from the depths, but rather you were of that ripe developmental age when you saw Jaws for the first time. That's the power of cinema. And with horror filmmakers particularly, they recognize that to truly scare an audience, you have to capitalize off of their fears and expectations. That's something that extends beyond genre to reflect the cultural fears at any given point. During the early part of the 20th century, D.W. Griffith was catapulted into stardom for the release of his most critically successful film and America's first blockbuster, Birth of a Nation. Originally titled The Klansman, the film is a violently racist, revisionist tale of the antebellum South that paints the KKK as heroes and Black Americans as monsters. Upon screening the film in the White House, President Woodrow Wilson said, "It's like writing history with lightning. My only regret is that it is all so terribly true." It was not terribly true, and many of the narratives shaped in film aren't. Despite the Jaws film showing over 18 on-screen deaths over the film's franchise, there's only about 1 U.S. death from a shark attack every 2 years. Still, there may be that fear every time we get into the water. Perhaps that fear stops you from shopping at a certain Walmart. We have these perceptions of poverty that are interlinked with how we perceive safety. We look at places like Pruitt-Igoe as symbols of America's failed public housing system, as symbols of the horror of poverty. And we have these misperceptions of the ghetto where we see it as nightmarish. And it was here that filmmaker Bernard Rose saw untapped potential. It was in his film Candyman from 1992 where he took the poverty nightmare and recontextualized it in Chicago's Cabrini Green projects. The film follows Helen Lyle, a graduate student who's researching the Candyman mythos, a monster who terrorizes the residents of an infamous North Side project. The film was originally based on a 1985 short story, The Forbidden, but rather than basing it in Liverpool, the film is based in Chicago's North Side projects. And the location here has so much power. Similar to the films Barbarian in 2022 and Don't Breathe in 2016, both of these films characterize Detroit's 8 Mile as unlivable, as hazardous, as something where there's danger around every corner. And certainly truth to parts of that portrayal. Detroit has experienced deep socioeconomic struggles due to their reliance on the manufacturing industry, as well as policy mismanagement. But there's been a lot of change. And Detroit in this film was not even filmed in Detroit. In fact, it wasn't even filmed in the United States. In Barbarian, it was filmed on a set in Bulgaria. further indicating the power that filmmakers have in crafting a narrative. The narrative in Candyman is about Candyman, a monster who is a black man terrorizing Cabrini Green's other black residents. And one of the people he terrorizes is Helen Lyle, a white woman, further relying on the racist imagery and echoing the racist imagery from Birth of a Nation. Dr. Robin Means Coleman from the University of Virginia writes in her book, The Black Guy Dies First, that Cabrini Green is like an African jungle, and Helen is the great white hunter pursuing big game. The fingerprint of director Bernard Rose is undeniable in this film. He does not try to challenge those exterior factors that keep people in poverty. And that's something that the remake sought to remedy. This film, directed by Nia DaCosta and produced by Jordan Peele's Monkey Paw Studios, follows the child that she saves, Anthony McCoy. And he's an artist. He's someone that is looking at his own identity as someone who is living in a gentrified neighborhood, but is actually from the Cabrini Green projects. He relied upon fear, just as many of us have. And we have these own perceptions of poverty that drive our psyches today, as well as impact our own communities. For me, I grew up in the Central Park neighborhood of Topeka, Kansas, which is a historically underserved and impoverished neighborhood with a poverty rate of about 50%. And we regularly shopped at our neighborhood grocery store, Dillon's, and whereas we knew it as our Dillon's, our neighborhood spot, our community touch point, those misperceptions of poverty were inescapable, and the community knew it as Ghetto Dillon's. Eventually, the grocery store closed, leaving the neighborhood in a very, very deep food desert. Now the two largest food deserts in the city sit in the central area with a food insecurity rate of about 280% of the national average. To make it all the more interesting, that neighborhood grocery store sits right here, right where that star is. This is a 1927 redlining map of the city of Topeka, where black residents were forced to live only in the hazardous housing. Central area is now about 50% minority residents, still facing many of the same problems today. And some people would like to forget that it happened here in Springfield. These are the legacies, these are the monsters that we have to respond to. And these are the same things that informed my short stories. I wrote a short story in Dr. Henderson's creative writing course called Old Habits Die Young that talks about public housing and urban poverty. And thanks to him, it was able to get second place in an international competition. It also inspired a short project I'm working on right now called Glass Skeletons for my film certificate. And this project looks at the way we internalize those narratives of poverty. We internalize the way that gentrification impacts our minds. And so the first step to that kind of anti-poverty advocacy is reshaping the narrative. So I have two ways. There's many ways we can address poverty, but I have two ways today. Firstly, we can make award-winning films that win Oscars and inspire sociological revolutions. Step one. Maybe feels a little bit out of reach for some of us. So the second one is something a little bit more within our grasp, and that's the communities right in our own homes. Oftentimes the communities we fear most are the communities that need the most help. If there's something in your community that makes you uncomfortable, perhaps you should start there. Thank you.
Our next Fuse Talk speaker is Alyssa Place. Alyssa is a senior music therapy major with certificates in celebrating neurodiversity and sports leadership. Her music therapy professors assisted in this presentation about her field studies client from this semester. Field studies is a class where music therapy majors get real-world experience with clients in real sessions. She will continue her education during an internship with Musical Bridges Music Therapy in Springfield beginning in July. Alyssa is passionate about advocating for music therapy and is excited to share with you a more in-depth look at what a music therapy session looks like. Let's welcome Alyssa to the podium.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Place, and like Dr. Harville said, I will be giving you an in-depth look at what a music therapy session with a neurodivergent 3-year-old might look like. In this presentation, I use pictures and videos from my session. I do have a signed consent form from my client's parents to be able to use these for this presentation. NB is my client this semester. He is a 3-year-old male with autism and ADHD. He comes to the Center for Music Therapy and Wellness, which is our clinic on campus, for 2 30-minute sessions per week. During these sessions, we work on specific goals and objectives, which were determined by his board-certified music therapist, who is my supervisor, and his parents during his first few sessions. In music therapy, we use music to work on non-musical goals. A few of my clients' goals include improving intelligible speech production, improving sustained attention, improving social skills, and improving the ability to follow one-step directions. Music therapy is also a field rich in research about these non-musical goal areas. In my research, I found that working on areas like speech and language acquisition and sustained attention can contribute to greater success in learning. There are also many connections between music and areas of the brain, like auditory language processing centers, which can strengthen those brain regions with the dual usage. Going back to some of those goals, the first one is improving intelligible speech production. My client struggles with consonants when they are not at the beginning of a word. So we use interventions that have sung cues to facilitate this speech and language development. Now, this objective has a lot of words in it, but it essentially boils down to, for the amount of trials that we present my client to respond to a cue, we want him to successfully complete 80% of them in a session. I have a quick video of this particular intervention where you can see some of this in action. You can hear him imitate my speech there. And again right there. He's really getting the P sound there. So this graph is a graph of results from this intervention over the course of the semester. You can see that there's consistent improvement with the client with this objective. That black line marks where the benchmark is at that 80%, and he is gaining momentum towards those 4 consecutive weeks where we want him to be above that 80%. Improving sustained attention is the second goal I will talk about. So my client's attention is easily drawn away if the current activity is not engaging. Most of our interventions do work on and require some amount of sustained attention. However, this particular result will go back to the intervention that you just saw a video of. So our goal is for him to sustain attention for at least 2 consecutive minutes. Now, you can see from this graph, my client is 3 years old. So there is going to be some fluctuation there. But the great thing is you can see again that black line marks where our benchmark is, and he has been above that for every session since the first one, where I was new and he was unfamiliar with me. So this is clearly indicative that we could probably raise that benchmark maybe to about 4 to 5 minutes to start with, and hope that he will gain his sustained attention up to that point. The third objective is to improve social skills. During music therapy sessions, we work on social greetings and social closings, which can create openness in a session and closure to a session. And this openness and closure then can translate to social situations outside of music therapy. So our objective here, again, wants that 80% benchmark to appropriately wave or verbalize hello or goodbye during those social greeting and session closing songs. Now the result here you can see in those first 2 sessions, those are definitely outliers to my client's normal engagement. Again, I was fairly new at this point, and he was not entirely comfortable with me leading the intervention yet. As he gained that comfort level, you can see his engagement start to rise, and it's clear that music therapy is effective in these social skill learning. The fourth and final goal that I will talk about today is the ability to improve his ability to follow one-step directions. The intervention that I use for this specifically uses rhythmic cues to direct the client in a movement. So I have a quick video of this one as well, where you can see some of those rhythmic and some verbal directions. So I'm cueing his movement of his feet. You'll start to hear a verbal cue. So for this objective, the client has not yet completed those 4 consecutive weeks above the 80% objective, but he is gaining momentum trending that way, and he is very close to that already. So the goals and objectives that I work on with NB are fundamental skills for many of our clients to build upon, not just NB. Music therapy encourages growth in these areas in a fun and engaging way, while also having the research behind it to back it up. This research, combined with the results achieved in music therapy, prove the efficacy of this practice. Thank you.
Jack Pendleton is a junior majoring in biochemistry. He is presenting research done in fulfillment of the requirements for his honors interdisciplinary inquiry and leadership minor. In addition, he is pursuing a minor in computer science and a certificate in holistic health practices. Outside of the classroom, Jack is president of the Epsilon Road chapter of Sigma Pi Fraternity and the Commuter Student Association, and is treasurer of the Pre-Health Professionals and Society of Physics Students. He is also an orientation coordinator and a member of several other student organizations. After graduating from Drury, he hopes to attend medical school and train to become a physician. Let's welcome Jack.
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Harville. I will be talking about identification and validation of arsenic-associated genes and risk model for predicting lung cancer. So why is it important to study lung cancer? Well, it is the leading cause of cancer mortality worldwide and is responsible for more than 12% of cancer cases. It also has a low relative 5-year survival rate compared to other cancers, and early detection is highly associated with survival. There are also many limitations with existing detection methods, so it involves things like exposing the patient to high levels of radiation, or in some cases they just aren't as accurate as detecting cancer as they could be. As I mentioned, early detection is key to survival. This graph shows the relative 5-year survival rate of lung cancer based on stage at diagnosis, and you can see at stage 1 it is over 70%, but as the stage of the disease progresses, that drops significantly all the way down to 21% at stage 4. So the time at which someone is diagnosed with lung cancer has a very high impact on their outcome. An emerging way to detect cancer are gene expression biomarkers. These were used successfully in 2022 with arsenic-associated genes for bladder cancer. This is interesting for lung cancer, though, because arsenic is also found in many of the environmental factors that lead to it. So things like cigarette smoke, pollution, and smog all also contain arsenic. So can a predictive model for lung cancer be developed from this set of genes? To test this, a data set had to be assembled with a large number of samples. And there ended up being 959 samples of gene expression data. This was all Affymetrix microarray data. There were 842 tumor samples and 117 normal samples. And it was assembled from 6 different studies that were published on GEO, which is a public repository of gene expression data. So this was 6 different studies collected at different times by different people that were aggregated to make this one data set. And it contained samples from all of the major subtypes of lung cancer. Now, because this was a data set assembled from different scientists working in different labs in different places at different times, there did have to be some normalization to ensure that statistics could be done accurately. So if you look at this first picture, it shows there's a lot of variation, there are lots of outliers, and the data is not very well grouped. One attempt to normalize it resulted in that second graph, which you can see many of the outliers are reduced and the distribution is much more compact. However, more normalization was needed, and finally the FRMA algorithm was most successful, showing that there were much fewer outliers and the grouping was much tighter. Here's another way to present this data. So you can see each color represents a study, and each individual point is a sample from one of those studies. And you can see that before normalization, many of the samples were more closely related to the samples from the same study than they were from the other samples, which implies that differences between the different experiments are adding confounding variables to the data, and a model from the data at this stage would just be pulling out differences between the studies, not actual underlying biological differences. So to fix this, another algorithm was used. This was the lemma algorithm, and you can see it significantly reduced this clustering due to the study in which the data was collected. Now there is no more grouping by study, and the actual biological differences can be examined. In addition to the data itself, lots of metadata was collected. So this is things about the patient, things like whether they were a smoker, the stage at which the cancer was diagnosed, and what kind of tissue it is, whether it's a tumor sample or a normal sample. So once all this data was assembled, differential expression analysis was used to analyze it, and this just shows how cancer changes gene expression levels, and it can either up or down regulate. So if you look at the first image, that shows an example of the cancer down-regulating gene expression, while in the second image it shows cancer up-regulating expression of a particular gene. There is a plot of all of the different significantly differentially expressed genes. You can see many were up-regulated, but there were some down-regulated ones as well. So out of all of these genes, 4 were used to model this behavior, and a logistic regression model was used with those 4 selected genes. And they were selected based on their known characteristics. So what do we know that these genes control? And these were the 4 that seemed most significant. This logistic regression model is a type of supervised machine learning algorithm, and it performs binary classification. That's just a kind of complicated way of saying it sorts things into 2 groups, and in this case the 2 groups were tumor or normal tissue, because we're trying to see, does this sample contain cancer or not? And the way you evaluate the performance of a linear regression model is by measuring the area under the curve, and here's a plot of that. This model ended up being 88.6% accurate, but this was just the preliminary test because this was the same data that was used to train the model. So to see if it was really accurate, another data set had to be constructed. This was made out of 1,182 samples of RNA sequencing data, and this was collected using this Illumina HiSeq 2000 platform, which is a more advanced way to collect gene expression data. 1,105 were tumor, 77 were normal, and this was assembled from 2 data sets from the Cancer Genome Atlas and 1 from GEO. And just like before, it contained all the major subtypes of lung cancer. And because this was assembled from 3 different studies done in 3 different places with 3 different protocols at 3 different times, there were some significant differences in the data that had to be corrected for, just like before, and it reduced that clustering by study down to the actual differences between cancer and non-cancer. And this one really reduced the amount of variance all the way from 30% down to around 7%. Just like before, clinical factors were collected because while these aren't used to create the model itself, they are useful for understanding how the model works. So they're important pieces of data to have. Now, to the actual testing of the model, just like before, these same 4 genes were used with the same logistic regression model. And in this case, the area under the curve was 0.829 at a 95% confidence interval. That means that it is 82.9% accurate at predicting the difference between tumor and non-tumor. So it is 82.9% accurate at detecting lung cancer. So the conclusion, genes associated with arsenic exposure can be used to predict lung cancer with a high degree of accuracy, and 4 robust biomarkers for lung cancer risk prediction were discovered. So there are a few ways this could be taken in the future. Investigating how those clinical factors affect the predictive ability is a thing I will be looking into. In addition, validating with physical samples could lead to some useful insights. Investigating other factors like epigenetics might also reveal some interesting factors about how this model works. And developing predictive models for other types of cancer could also be useful because it has been proven to work for bladder cancer. Now it appears to be working for lung cancer, so it might work for other types of cancer, especially those that are associated with arsenic. I would like to thank the following people for guidance throughout this process. So Professor Joshua Kennedy here at Drury and Dr. Sandeep Singhal and Dr. Sonalika Singhal at the University of North Dakota. The 3 of them have provided lots of mentorship and guidance throughout this whole process, learning how to process this data and what it all means. I would also like to thank Val Serafimov, the VP of Tech Services, for providing the computer equipment that this research was done on. It takes a computer with a lot of memory to be able to process this many samples, and he was able to provide one so that this research would be able to be done. And I would also like to thank the Tri Beta Scholarship Fund for providing funding for this research. Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Taylor Dotery. This presentation was developed as part of Taylor's Political Science Senior Seminar course, where she made the decision to investigate the relationship between celebrity culture and political behavior. She has always been curious about what drives people to participate in politics, especially in today's media-driven environment. Her research focuses on how celebrity endorsements influence voter mobilization, particularly among younger and less politically engaged audiences. Taylor examines how celebrities use their platforms, especially on social media, to shape political messaging and encourage civic action. Outside of research, she serves as vice president of the Pre-Law Club and plans to attend law school, where she hopes to use her background in political science to pursue a career centered on justice and public politics. Taylor, welcome to the stage.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Taylor, and today I'll be presenting my research on the influence of celebrity endorsements on voter mobilization. So my research centers around the question, how do celebrity endorsements affect voter mobilization? We already know that they do have an impact, but how much of an impact do they truly have? Now, celebrity endorsements aren't a new thing. They've actually been shaping US politics for over a century. Al Jolson supported Warren Harding in the 1920s. In 1960, Sammy Davis Jr. endorsed JFK. That signaled a deeper connection between pop culture and politics. More recently, Kid Rock backed Donald Trump in 2016, and in 2024, Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala Harris. Now today, these endorsements carry even more weight due to social media, where celebrities can instantly reach millions, especially younger people. Now, Taylor Swift is a compelling example. Once apolitical, she's become increasingly vocal in encouraging political participation. Her evolution illustrates how celebrities can become powerful political influencers. Now, to understand that influence, we need to first define what a celebrity endorsement is, and they tend to fall into two main categories. A political endorsement, where a celebrity publicly supports a candidate or a party, or a civic engagement endorsement, where the message encourages participation, like registering to vote, without supporting a specific candidate or party. Now, Taylor Swift has engaged in both of these, political endorsements in 2018 and 2024, and a civic engagement endorsement in 2023. And we'll look at all three of those in depth here in a minute. So previous research does show that celebrity endorsements affect voters, specifically younger voters. For example, Brew Baker in Austin found that 40% of voters aged 18 to 25 said a celebrity influenced their decision to either vote generally or to vote for a specific candidate. And these endorsements tend to be most effective when the celebrity is seen as credible and their audience shares values with that political message. A really known well example of that is Oprah Winfrey's endorsement of Barack Obama in 2008. That endorsement significantly boosted his support among women and Black voters. So to study Swift's impact, I analyzed three key events: the 2018 Tennessee Senate race, the 2023 National Voter Registration Day, and the 2024 presidential election. For each, I examined voter registration and web traffic data from vote.org and vote.gov surrounding Swift's political posts. That was the right slide. So I hypothesized that Swift's endorsements would significantly boost voter engagement. I expected 1, higher voter registration rates, and 2, increased web traffic to registration platforms like vote.org and vote.gov. So in 2018, Taylor Swift made her first major political endorsement, supporting Phil Bredesen, a Democrat, over the Republican incumbent Marsha Blackburn in the Tennessee Senate race. This marked a pivotal moment in her political evolution, as this was the first time Swift took a clear stance on a candidate, and the endorsement has significant immediate impact on voter engagement, as shown in the data. Vote.org traffic surged by 300%, with 65,000 visits in just 24 hours following Swift's post. This is compared to the usual daily average of just over 14,000 visitors. In Tennessee, 2,144 people visited Vote.org's voter registration page within a day, and that nearly matches the total number of visitors for the entire month of September. It's also worth noting that 30% of new registrants were aged 18 to 24, that demographic that's historically less likely to be engaged in voting. Now, while these numbers show Swift's ability to mobilize voters, the endorsement did face limitations due to Tennessee's polarized political environment. Ultimately, Bredesen did lose the race, which shows that while celebrities can drive that short-term engagement, it may not always translate into immediate electoral success. So in 2023, Taylor Swift shifted her focus from endorsing specific candidates to promoting nonpartisan civic engagement. During National Voter Registration Day, she used her platform to encourage her fans to vote, leveraging the widespread attention of her Eras Tour, and the results were quite impressive. Vote.org recorded 35,252 registrations, which was a 23% increase compared to the previous year. Swift's Instagram post also generated a 1,226% spike in website traffic within just 1 hour, demonstrating that immediate impact. And what makes this campaign notable is its broad and inclusive appeal. It wasn't tied to a political candidate or party, and that allowed it to resonate with a more diverse audience. Andrea Haley, CEO of Vote.org, commented on this, saying this effort reflected a highly encouraging sign of voter enthusiasm, and it shows the potential for celebrity-driven campaigns to boost civic participation on a national scale. And then finally, in 2024, Taylor Swift returned to the political endorsements, this time publicly supporting Kamala Harris during the presidential election. This endorsement came at a critical time, only 8 weeks out from Election Day, and it generated unprecedented voter engagement. Vote.org traffic surged to 175,000 visitors on the day of Swift's endorsement, and that's compared to the usual 30,000 visitors. The following day, traffic skyrocketed to 727,000 visits, which is a 585% increase within just 24 hours. 406,000 additional people accessed Vote.gov directly through Swift's Instagram link, accounting for more than half of the site's total traffic during that time period. Now, this data highlights Swift's growing ability to mobilize voters at scale, particularly among those first-time registrants. Andrea Haley also commented on this effort, saying, "It didn't just generate awareness, it translated into measurable action, reinforcing the idea that celebrity-driven campaigns can have a tangible, significant impact on voter mobilization, especially in high-stakes elections, just like the 2024 election." Okay. So celebrity endorsements, especially from figures like Taylor Swift, have shown a clear ability to increase voter engagement, as evidenced by significant spikes in website traffic and registration activity. While this study does have its limitations, such as only tracking registration without being able to confirm voter turnout and focusing solely on Taylor Swift, it does show the growing ability of celebrities in politics. Taylor Swift's influence, especially in 2018, 2023, and 2024, illustrate how these endorsements can drive measurable increases in voter mobilization. While endorsements alone may not solve the problem of voter disengagement, they do serve as a powerful tool in modern politics, bridging that gap between celebrities and voters. Now, as political campaigns continue to evolve in the digital age, understanding how celebrity influence can engage future voters and foster democratic participation will remain an important and crucial area of study. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Savannah McCool. Savannah's presentation was developed for her research seminar in political science. As a political science major, she is interested in the real-world impacts of public policy and how policy can be shaped to help marginalized groups and communities. In addition to her political science major, Savannah has a minor in Spanish and an activist toolkit certificate. She also serves as president of Juris Pre-Law Club. After she graduates in May, Savannah plans to attend law school and pursue a career as an immigration attorney. She hopes to pursue advocacy on women's and immigrants' issues and with a focus of reforming policy in these areas. Let's welcome Savannah to the podium.
Hello, my name is Savannah McCool, and today I'll be presenting my research on legal frameworks' impact on sex workers' health and safety across 4 countries. Before we begin, I would like to disclose that this presentation contains discussion of sensitive topics, including sexual assault and violence. So over the past 20 to 30 years, several countries have moved away from the traditional model of outright banning prostitution, instead implementing different regulations on the practice. Sex workers experience a higher risk of violence and HIV and STI infection than the general population, and lawmakers have used this as a justification for changing legislation, with the stated goal of improving sex workers' access to health and legal services. However, when I began to research this topic, I didn't find any comparative studies looking at the effects of legal frameworks on sex workers' vulnerability to violence or infection across legal contexts. However, I did find that criminalization was highly correlated to more restrictive policing practices, sex workers experiencing limited access to health and legal services, and a legitimization of existing social stigma, all of which increase sex workers' vulnerability to violence and infection. Over the course of my research, I identified 4 models of prostitution regulation. The first is criminalization, in which sex work is outright banned. The second is client criminalization, in which the sale of sex is legal, while the purchase of sex is not. I call these 2 more restrictive. The third is partial legalization, in which some forms of sex work are legal while others are not. And the fourth is legalization, in which all forms of sex work are effectively legal. I call these less restrictive. I hypothesized that sex workers would experience a greater vulnerability to violence and infection in more restrictive environments. To choose my case studies, I looked at Amnesty International reports based on interviews with sex workers from each country. I translated the relevant legislation in order to categorize my case studies, and when available, I used reports from nonprofit organizations aimed at helping sex workers in each country. Moving on to the case studies, our first is the Dominican Republic, in which sex work is not explicitly criminalized or legalized, but is in practice treated as if it is legal. There is a gender-based violence epidemic in the Dominican Republic, and many of the respondents had multiple violent experiences throughout their lives. Violence from police was especially common, usually in the form of sexual abuse. This often occurred as an exchange of sex in return for protection from other police officers, or with police threatening sex workers with arbitrary arrest if they did not provide sexual favors. However, few of the respondents reported violent incidents due to fear of retaliation from police officers and a lack of evidence due to police officers taking measures to reduce physical evidence. Our second case study is Hong Kong, in which indoor sex work by individuals is legal while soliciting, advertising, or assisting another person in sex work is not legal. This actually was the case study with the lowest reported violence, as respondents said that it was relatively rare. However, they reported that coercion and refusal to pay was relatively common. Sex workers also said that they felt vulnerable due to having to work alone. There were disparities in reporting violence. Hong Kong residents were more likely to report violent incidents because they are legally allowed to perform sex work, while migrants are not. And indoor sex workers were also more likely to report violence because they were covered by Hong Kong's law, while outdoor sex workers were in violation of it. Women said that the fear of being charged with solicitation or deported was a major deterrent to them reporting violent incidents, and many also cited the belief that police would not take them seriously if they did report. Police in Hong Kong also used condoms as evidence in solicitation cases, which discouraged sex workers from using them and therefore increased their risk of infection. Our next case study is Norway, which uses the Nordic model of prostitution regulation. So the sale of sex is legal, but the purchase of sex is not. However, in practice, police often target sex workers in order to find and arrest buyers. Norwegian police have targeted landlords, threatening them with charges of assisting in prostitution if they knowingly rent to tenants who practice sex work. This has led sex workers to work in unfamiliar environments so that they are not evicted, which increases their vulnerability to violence. The reduction of the market in Norway resulting from its laws has also given buyers more power because they are aware of the decreased demand. As in many other cases, violence in Norway is often underreported. The use of charges against violent perpetrators as evidence in eviction and deportation cases against sex workers was an especially strong deterrent in this country. Clients are aware of this and have used police as a threat in their attempts to coerce sex workers. Nonprofits in Norway have also noticed a decline in condom use among sex workers, in part due to police's use of condoms as evidence, but also due to the increasingly competitive market discouraging sex workers from using condoms. This, in turn, decreases the bargaining power of sex workers who would like to use condoms. Our final case study is Papua New Guinea, in which sex work is completely illegal. However, it is rarely prosecuted because police prefer to dole out punishments themselves. Sex workers in Papua New Guinea experienced violence from clients, police, and family members, and sexual abuse from police was frequent. Several sex workers reported receiving beatings and sexual assault from clients, but very few reported violent incidents due to fear of being charged with prostitution or facing further sexual abuse from police officers. The fear of being outed as a sex worker to their families and communities, and therefore ostracized, also discouraged many victims from reporting. There is an HIV epidemic in Papua New Guinea, but police use condoms as evidence, which discourages sex workers from using them, as I have discussed in other cases. Also, several sex workers said they experienced stigma from healthcare providers who were aware that they were a sex worker, which dissuaded them from seeking future treatment. In conclusion, my hypothesis that sex workers would face more vulnerability to violence and infection in more restrictive environments was not supported by the data because violence was prevalent everywhere and often went unreported. I found that police practices have a direct impact on sex workers' vulnerability to violence and infection, and that the practice of using condoms as evidence was especially harmful. More research is needed in this area, but if lawmakers truly want to improve sex workers' well-being, as they say, they must consider what the implementation of that legislation looks like and the detrimental effects of existing practices on sex workers' health and safety. Thank you.
Next, we have Allie Boyd. This presentation was developed through Allie's work as a senior mathematics major with a minor in pre-engineering. Allie is presenting on behalf of her research group, which includes Cami Esslinger, AJ Agers, and Kylie Warden, facilitated by research advisor Dr. Colin Bacher. They provide mathematical modeling and computational methods to study the effects of curcumin and its analogs on colorectal cancer progression. Allie currently serves as president of the Math and Computer Science Club and the corresponding secretary of Kappa Mu Epsilon, the National Mathematics Honor Society. After graduation, she will pursue a master's degree in mathematics at the University of Illinois at Chicago. So welcome, Allie.
Okay, a little staticky. What's up? Sorry, y'all. Okay. Okay. There we go. I'll just talk into this. Okay. My name is Allie Boyd, and I am presenting today on behalf of my research cohorts. We heard their names. Special thank you to our faculty advisor, Colin Bacher, for facilitating this research over the past 2 semesters. I'm going to be talking about modeling the effects of curcumin on colon cancer cells. So what is colon cancer? Colon cancer is a type of cancer that affects your large intestine. It begins when cells grow abnormally and form benign polyps, and over time those polyps can become cancerous. We see about 1.9 million new cases every year and over 900,000 deaths, so that makes it the 3rd leading cause of cancer-related deaths worldwide. Regular screenings like colonoscopies can help detect and remove those polyps early before they become cancerous. So where does curcumin come in? We're a little ahead here. There we go. Curcumin is derived from turmeric. It's that bright orange spice you'll find in your kitchen. It's known for its anti-inflammatory and potential anti-cancer properties. it slows down cancer's growth and encourages apoptosis, which is the process of cell death. Unfortunately, though, it has a low bioavailability, which means it's quickly broken down and not very well absorbed in the body. So we create these analogs, which work like variations in a recipe where you'd add more salt or flour, except we're not aiming for the best taste, we're aiming for the best performance. So we want the most stability and absorption for the best analog. Why do we need mathematicians to do this? So mathematical research can involve many different techniques and strategies, but we use an ODE technique, which is ordinary differential equations. For those of you who don't know what a differential equation is, it maps the rate of change of an equation. So, for example, in the lab, they used 40,000 cancer cells in a Petri dish and then added curcumin, and after 2 hours, tested the percentage of them left alive. In our model, we include non-cancerous proliferative cells. We start from 0 cancer cells, and we also include immune cells. We're aiming to hit data points that we see in the lab experiments with our computer. So let's talk about our model now. Our model is based on an SIR model, which comes from papers about modeling breast cancer and infectious diseases. The 3 categories are susceptible, infected, and removed or recovery. So we chose this framework as a model that would work best for our conditions. The susceptible and infected populations interact with one another, leading to that removed or recovered category. We also included immune cells because they play a role in cancer's movement to apoptosis. So when I talk about movement, where's my laser? Oh, we're really tight. Oh, I have one. Sorry. Thank you. Okay. The susceptible and infected populations interact and move along to this state. So here is our scheme. So we have these 4 states plus our curcumin here. And if you imagine these boxes as little rooms and then the arrows as hallways, we could go from proliferative cells and move along this line at a rate of beta into cancer. And we see that here. We're all moving at the same time. So what I want to point out for this graph mainly is that when we are leaving a box, it is subtraction. So we see we're subtracting that beta here in our equation. And we're moving into cancer. So we have our cancer equation here, and beta is positive. And I'll also point out these arrows up here are representative of the population regenerating itself. Okay. And here are our parameters list. I won't go too much into detail on each of these, but this first one up here is the one we're aiming to figure out. This is the amount of curcumin that is effective, and all of these are estimations from papers. So we have our movement into cancer, our death parameters, which are the deltas here, and then we have lambda and mu here to represent our growth and removal, because we don't keep our dead cells forever. Okay. And then once we were happy with those equations, we moved to graphing with Python, which is a computer language. We use an ODE int function to, sorry, let me take a breath. We use an ODE program to solve these systems of equations, and we solved it as a coupled system. And coupled system is just that each equation's answer depends on the previous one, so they all are dependent on one another. And these are the graphs that we got from that, and these aren't perfect quite yet, but I do want to point out a few key things. So we'll notice that they all change around the same time period here. Oh, yeah. And that's what we want. We don't want these strange behaviors at the beginning because these aren't very biologically feasible. And I'll focus in on the cancer graph here for the rest of my explanation, but we don't want this. We want the stability, and we're aiming for these data points here. So the little X's up there are means from the individual analogs, and then the teal dots are geometric, harmonic, and arithmetic means of the data as a whole. And so we want to be hitting those. We just want to fix this behavior here. So how do we do that? Our next steps are going to be expanding our data set, and that would improve that behavior at the beginning, because we used estimates and simplified a lot of parts of the biological process because cancer progression varies quite a bit from person to person. We also have been making progress on a feasibility proof, which that is just saying that our biology and math agree. For example, we couldn't have less than 0 cells, and so that feasibility proof will show each equation has an upper and a lower bound on it. Also, machine learning can help increase our accuracy. Machine learning would guess on those parameter estimates and put in a bunch of different guesses until we start hitting our targets and getting better graphs. So in the end, our main research goal is just to model cancer as accurately as possible in order to choose the most viable analog to move forward with in research. Okay, that's all.
Our last speaker today is Cassidy Bates. This project was developed in collaboration with the Drury University Theater Department as a part of the Computer Science Game Development Capstone Project. It is a culmination of 2 years of work across multiple disciplines and capstone years. Contributor Cassidy Bates is majoring in computer science game development while pursuing a minor in fine arts, while Sebastian Gonzalez, who also contributed to this project, is a double major in computer science game development and music. Both are pursuing a certificate in graphic storytelling. They have applied their combined disciplines in the creative arts and in computer science to create a project that is both technically innovative and creatively imaginative. Welcome to the stage.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Cassidy Bates, and I am here presenting the interactive movie Stool Spirit. So to expand a bit more on what I mean by Stool Spirit and what an interactive movie it is a multiplayer horror comedy movie in which at various important points throughout the story, the viewers may use an app on their phone to vote on what happens next. Now, this can be anything from what choices the protagonists make, who they trust, where they go, or even in some cases, what choices the antagonists make. So, how does it work? It is a multiplayer game that is built using Unreal Engine 5, and the viewers can download the Stool Spirit app via a QR code on their theater or host screen. So, ideally, this would be played in like a full movie theater or even in a room like this, somewhere that has a big projection that the movie can be played on. And at the start of the movie, there will be a QR code. They can pull up their phones or whatever mobile devices they have, download the app, join the lobby, and then they can forget about their phones for a while, until at an important point in the story, their phone will buzz, telling them, hey, something important is about to happen. There's a fork in the road here. Then they can vote on what they would like to happen next. Server will then tally those votes and construct the movie accordingly. So to talk a bit more about how it was made, everything was filmed in Clara Thompson Hall, and it is all acted and directed by Drury University theater students. So it's very locally made, and it's also a very interdisciplinary project between the theater department and us over at the computer science and game development department. This is all done over 2 years, and we have hundreds of clips that all come together to create this project, and it's all directed and written by Taylor Stevenson. So, as mentioned before, this is meant to be a very collaborative experience. In the game's current state, up to 16 players can join at a time, and the choices they make will very heavily impact the movie, so you're going to want to choose wisely. You can work together with your friends to get the best ending or the worst ending, or collect all of the endings, depending on what you like to do and what you're interested in. And one of our goals with this was to make it accessible to both people who enjoy movies and people who enjoy video games, making it a kind of combination of those two forms of media. So, what is Unreal Engine 5? Because that is the main crux that we have used to build this game. It is a game engine made by Epic Games that allows game developers like me and my team to create and build games for free. Now, even if you haven't played some of these games, you've definitely heard of some of the titles that have been built using this, such as Fortnite or Dead by Daylight, if that gives you a better idea. And we have used it to enable our multiplayer and manage the user experience that we have going. So managing all of the data, the voting, the timing, everything there. And I'm not going to go too much into all of the nerdy stuff because most of the people here probably aren't interested in that. But we have written our code using C++ and Unreal Engine blueprints, which we have an example of here for anyone who's interested in what that might look like. We've also used Unreal Engine 5 to manage our video effects in some ways, mainly through the post-processing feature. Now, a post-processed material in Unreal Engine 5 is a custom material that changes the look of the game. This can be anything from the tone mapping to the lighting to the colors. It essentially allows you to really customize that look and feel, and that's very important for what we're doing here because it allows us to use effects that aren't edited into the footage as well itself, while also speeding up the process. So rather than having to change and edit all of the footage before we insert it into the game and the application, we can just do it in the After Effects sort of and turn it on and off throughout the game, really saving time and not having to put as much work into the editing. And one example of that we have is this sort of old VHS look, because this screenshot that you see here is from the actual footage, and it's from the time that takes place back in the 1980s. So we want to create a more immersive look and feel by making it look like sort of old found footage, worn out VHS tape. And you'll see a better, more animated look at this in the demo I'm going to show later. So we've also worked on really customizing our user interface design because that is also a very big part of this project, especially when it comes to voting and everything. So on the right here, you can see the voting UI. On the left is the lobby UI. So that's going to be managing the experience, allowing everyone to join, creating the actual server that anyone can join. It's pretty self-explanatory, especially for anyone who's ever played a video game or even something like Kahoot or any sort of multiplayer experience. And we've designed this to be very simple and intuitive while also reflecting our horror theme of the movie, especially as you can see on the right. And right now we're working on adjusting it for readability because we obviously want it to be as accessible as possible to the most people. And here is a very silly little demo I have recorded. Disclaimer, this is in no way reflective of how the actual movie will look, but this is something that I have created with my Oscar-winning acting to show how the voting will actually work with this simulated app on the side.
Oh God, he's getting closer. I just don't know what I should do. I could run onto the roof and try and escape that way, or I could hide under the stairs and hope that he doesn't find me. I just don't know what to do. The roof.
I'm skimming there tonight.
Shout out to my roommate for his excellent acting. So now that I've given a demo of the current state of the project, I do want to talk about our future work a little bit. So one of the main things and the most important, not the most important, but one of the most important parts of the project is our mobile development. We want to get this working for Android and iOS, and we have almost got the Android working, but are still working out a few bugs. We also want to continue that UI improvement, as I mentioned before, improving the look and updating that lobby UI to fit the overall aesthetic. We also want to insert the final footage because while my demo is fantastic, it's not indicative of an entire movie. And we want to add more players because right now, with the default parameters we have, you can only have up to roughly 16 people, but in an ideal world, you would have an entire theater in a room full of this that can all work together. And finally, we have a slight server synchronization issue where sometimes one person's phone will say 15 seconds, another will say 14. And while it doesn't seem significant, in tight decisions like this, it really can add up to a lot. So we're working on fixing that. And then finally, I would like to thank all of our contributors. So first and foremost, our clients over at the Drury University Theater Department. Brian Shipman and Taylor Stevenson are our two clients, as well as everyone who worked together to act in and film all of the movie footage. I would also like to thank the previous Drury graduates, Coleman Darnell and Alex Johns, who actually started this project during their capstone year before passing it on to us. Finally, I'd like to thank our advisors, Dr. Chris Branton and Dr. Scott Simmons, and then the current contributors with myself working as the project manager and Sebastian Gonzalez working as the master of our mobile development. Thank you all for listening, and feel free to find me with questions.
We will be starting the keynote speaker a few minutes early, but let's give these great students one more round of applause.